Dr. Pepe Ramnath was born on December 17, 1962, on the island of Trinidad. He is the husband of Angela, married since 1986 and father of 3 children, Matthew, Joshua, and Leah. He comes from a family of 8 children and gave his life to Christ in December 1982, shortly after the passing of his mother. Dr. Pepe can be seen on television in Florida, Guyana, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Trinidad and Tobago. He is faithful to his assignment, driven by purpose and energized by his vision. Dr. Pepe and Angela are entrepreneurs and owners of a growing business, Dove Environmental Corporation, a laboratory that tests for environmental matrices, microbiological, and air quality. They've met with heads of state and other governmental officials on behalf of science and human issues. Dr. Pepe Ramnath and his wife, Angela Ramnath, are founders and senior pastors of the Miramar Kingdom Community Center, formerly Miramar Christian Center International, since 1995. His ministry has been personally mentored and covered from Dr. Miles and Ruth Ann Monroe over the years. Dr. Pepe has a great passion for the presence of the Holy Spirit, family life, and education, which has taken him to the nations of this world. He is a graduate at the Macron Research Institute, Chicago, in light microscopy and has completed postgraduate work at the Center for Disease Control, CDC, in medical mycology, microbiology at Emory University, LSU, the University of New Mexico, Aerobiological Research Institute, and the College of Microscopy in Chicago, Illinois. He began his academic studies at the City University of New York and transferred his work to the University of Sindh and received a bachelor's degree in microbiology, industrial. He then received a master's degree in environmental science at the University of East and a distance re-evaluation doctoral degree from the University of East, and finally, a specialized Doctor of Philosophy and Environmental Microscopy with Brea State University, a non-US Gulf accreditation. The International Institute of Church Management honored him on May 30th, 2008, with an honorary doctorate in theology. He was again awarded with another honorary doctorate in Christian leadership and literature with the Academy of Universal Global Peace, Chennai, India, on January 7th, 2010. An honorary doctoral degree in philosophy, society and human rights with the Latin University of Theology State of California on March 2014. Dr. Ramnath has received the Golden Rule Award at the Gerald Ford Presidential Library in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Dr. Ramnath received the position as an NGO Extraordinary Ambassador at the United Nations in Vienna, Austria, and New York. He is the author of 4 books: The Supernatural Kingdom, The Genetics of Vision, The Character of a King, and Rediscovering Eden, subtitled The Science and Nature of Environments and Atmospheres. He has co-authored a book with Dr. Miles Monroe based on spiritual sons through fatherhood, a book addressing the benefits of proper release, destroying premature births and abortion of sons and daughters in the ministry, which has never been published since the recalling of Dr. Monroe on November 9th, 2014. Dr. Pepe Ramnath leads the MKCC church family on a beautiful facility that sits on 4 acres of land in the city of Miramar, Florida. He is on the board of directors and vice president of Environmental Sustainability Protection for the International Third World Association, ITWALA. He is on the board of the Miles Monroe's International USA and regularly requested speaker at Dr. Miles Monroe Kingdom Training Conference ASAF, and the Global Leadership Summit. He is presently in high demand around the world as a conference speaker and government consultant. Dr. Ramnath also serves on the board of directors of the South Florida Pastors Network for International Relations. In every service, an atmosphere of God's presence is experienced as worshippers are absorbed in God's presence inside the incubator of Eden's perfect environmental kingdom. His practical, scientific, atmospheric, and environmental approach in teaching the message of the kingdom has created a unique balance of power, gifts, and character, fruits in the lives of people. He believes that character, integrity, and personality are better developed in an atmosphere of Eden on earth, and education is crucial in becoming an effective witness for Christ to an advancing world. He is committed to raising the standards of people through the careful mix of science and the kingdom for the release of the hidden nucleic potential of man. His mission is to raise leaders in the culture of God's kingdom who would eventually influence this world economically, politically, socially, and culturally. He is determined to see the manifested culture and glory of God be made tangible to all of the world's sports, science, education, philosophy, arts, governments, etc., found on the earth. Come and experience an atmosphere of His presence today.
We're right back with you. Thank you very much. So we're coming back to you live again, Mamlakat Broadcast Network, and still again with our guest of this day, Dr. Pepe Rama. Welcome again, Dr. Pepe Rama, to this show.
You.
I'm so happy to have you again with me on this show. And then as we just have the first two set questions about the tarrying in the presence of God, about the abiding, the tangible presence, and the manifest presence. That was awesome. So now that will lead me into this third question. Today preaching is more focusing on grace. Grace here, we hear grace, but no fear. Grace without fear. Is there such things? Many churches are promising a blessed life. Come to my church, pay your tithe. You will have a blessed life. Give double offering or give double tithe. You will have a double blessed life. Yet looking at the book of Acts, where exactly the church started or originated, we don't see it in the life of Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the Lord, the head of the church. We don't see it neither in the life of Peter, John, or Paul the apostle. We can find it anywhere in the book. So it wasn't about the blessed life they were living, but rather they gave all their life, all what they have, to the Lord Jesus Christ. That means surrendering their life to them to shape and transform the world. Can you elaborate on that? And why do some pastors use this term, my church here, that church there, my church here, my church there? Is it their church or is it Jesus Christ's church? Are they establishing their own church that we don't know? But I would like you to really to elaborate on that grace message, the message of grace, grace without fear.
Yes. Well, grace was never given to us to replace the law. And I think, we have to be very careful how we communicate what grace is. Because some believe almost to an extent that grace is a license to sin. And it's not so. Grace itself is a law. Remember Jesus said, I did not come to abolish or to do away with the law. He was a law-abiding man. Yeah. Because if you remove law, you create a lawless society.
True.
And the enemy is the one who is lawless. And he's trying to actually create a lawless society. As you can see, in the time that we live in, there is so much talks about the mark of the beast and, re-identifying people and, debunking and getting rid of the police department and all those stuff and so forth. And we do know, of course, there have been some failures in the systems, not just the police system, the economical, the social, political systems. There has been failures in all of them. Do we get rid of all of them? This is something to think about. But grace is actually given to us so that we will have sufficient amount of protected umbrella time to abide by the law, to figure out what the law is. When you're given a credit card, you're given sometimes 30 days as a grace period. That grace period of time means you can spend, you can buy whatever you want to buy within 30 days. Nobody will stop you.
Yeah.
But after that 30 days, something happens. You better pay that bill that you accumulated within that 30 days. Why? Because you could be arrested. There's so many people that have been given the grace period of time to make certain changes in their lives, to make changes in their marriage life, in their social lives, in their walk with God. And God has given them that grace period of time. And many have not made the necessary change. They have not pursued God to acquire the information, the knowledge to make that change. And so now they are out of grace. They are outside of that umbrella of protection. And so now they are facing the elements that are out there. And this is what makes it dangerous. It is absolutely dangerous. And I do understand when a pastor says, my church, I think he's identifying or she's identifying the location of the church and the church that they pastor. But you still have to be very careful in how you communicate it. There are different ways that you could communicate that without making that claim that it is yours. Now, if you change the philosophy and the doctrines or the theology to your own interpretation, then you can probably make that claim. But if you're declaring what Jesus preached, which is the message of the kingdom, you better know this is the Church of Jesus Christ.
Exactly.
And so you have to make sure that you identify, just like how we identify the station, MBN over here. This is the radio station that you are hosting.
Yeah.
We have to also identify the church that Jesus Christ leads. And I think, there are so much compromise with certain words, certain theological stance and doctrines in the scriptures that we are trying to please many, because the softer we present the gospel, the greater the opportunity of gathering large crowds. God is not He's not interested in very, very large crowds. You can see every time Jesus would speak to the large crowds, he would leave in a boat and he would go to a house and he would sit there with 12 men. And he would begin to talk to them about it. Sometimes when we allow ourselves to get so large, you get the accolades of the community that you're successful, because it's very democratic. The larger the amount you get to vote, you are the one that's in top. But sometimes we lose the very essence of what the gospel wants us to do, and that is to disciple people. And you disciple people in very, very small groups. And when you have that small group, you disciple them, you help them out of problematic lifestyles. You bring them into the image and the likeness of God. You bring them into the mind of Christ. And that takes time. And you cannot do that from a pulpit out to the pews. You can only really do that in very small groups. And so we have to go back. There is a system out there where the number 300 is where they said one pastor can safely disciple over 300 people by doing the 12, the 12, the 12.
Yes. And
when you deviate from that 300 of people, you'll begin to lose discipleship. I know that Victoria wrote a beautiful book in regards to the kingdom, and she talks about the effectiveness of Greece and Rome as they used 300 senators to govern an entire nation. And we see in the story of Gideon.
Yes.
Gideon, God brought down that number to 300 people, and they destroyed a military might of about 250,000 people. How do you do that? Because in 300 you have community, and when you have community, everyone is looking out for one another. So if someone is coming to attack you, I am going to protect you. The other one is going to protect you because we are in community, and you could literally defeat tens of thousands of people with just 300. And I think we are coming back to that place in the time that we are living with the COVID that's out there. It seems as though God has just shut the door, his door to the house of the Lord, because he wants us to know You are not going to return to me the same way. You're going to return to me with the intentions of discipling people with respect and honor when you enter into my house.
Wow,
Yes.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Wow, wow. And this lead me into my next question. 77 times Jesus rebuked the religious leader in the New Testament. And Peter put it in this way in 1 Peter 4:17 by saying that we have to always look upon ourselves because the responsibility is on each shoulder of. So in other words, responsibility rests on each one of us. Could it be that God allowed this coronavirus of 2019 to actually call his body to amend their ways?
Wow. I think you even answered a question in that question. but you know, listen, this thing is no longer community wide. It's not even nationally wide. It is now global. The entire world have a situation with the COVID-19. And I think that God has allowed this to come in the land to do a number of things. The number one thing is to restore his laws back on the earth. Number two, what are those laws? Well, if you trace the history of the earth, you will see almost every 100 years, it seems that there's an occurrence of almost every 100 years, there's some type of major plague that hit this earth. You know, you had the Black Plague, you had the Spanish flu, and you go on with so many different plague that plagued our land. Each one of these people was successful in overcoming these plague by one major medical instruction that they did, and that was to isolate themselves, to go into quarantine. Where did they get an idea from? They got an idea from the Old Testament. When Moses, when the plague came over Egypt that time, Moses was commanded to instruct the children of Israel to take the blood in a hyssop and put it over the doorpost and go inside and stay in there eating roast lamb with spices. Now, when you look at the roast lamb, whenever you roast a lamb, you have a tendency to draw out zinc. A lot of zinc comes out of lamb when it's roasted. If you fry it and so forth, it does not come out. But if you roast it, you put it on the heat to roast it, it brings out zinc. Those bitter spices really was to strengthen the immune system. Bitter herbs, right? You are very good at these kind of stuff. So now we have instruction to stay inside quarantine and wait there until we tell you it was safe to do so. The reason why there is always a resurgence of the COVID is because we are not taking the necessary right instruction according to scriptures to quarantine ourselves long enough that this COVID will actually disappear, and to strengthen our immune system by using that zinc, using your vitamins and so forth that are in those spices. Those spices has a lot of stuff. I'm pretty sure they probably have quinine in there too as well. But when we use those spices and we use the zinc from the lamb, it goes into the cell system, and then it stops the virus if it tries to get into the system, because the zinc has the ability to actually maim or to silence an enzyme that we call the reverse transcriptase. The reverse transcriptase is the part inside of the cell that actually replicate and multiplies a virus or a bacteria or any type of germ. But if you shut that down with the zinc, then there will be no replication. So when you're inside of the home and you have all these things happening, you're shutting down now the machinery, the enzyme that is replicating viruses, and you are still quarantined when it is time announced by God's people of the hour to come outside. You're coming outside now after this disease or this plague has come all the way down. But when you're out there, if somebody is still exposed, you got zinc from eating the lamb. You have an immune system now that is strengthened by the spices. So I think that God is making a statement to the world. He's telling the world that I have always had the answer for you, but you're not listening to me. You're still turning to all of your medical equipment and all of your medical studies, and they are failing. Go back to my word and see what I'm saying. So God is doing a few things. The other thing that I strongly believe that God is doing with this COVID-19, especially when it comes to the house of God, because there's a difference between the house of God and the church.
Yeah.
The church is the people, but the house of God is where we meet.
Yeah.
And our homes is not the house of God. There's a place. Let me go back and show you something. After Jesus was resurrected and he met with his disciples and so forth, he told them to go and wait in an upper room. Me and you were in that upper room with Dr. Monroe. That's a house that was there.
Yeah.
And 120 of them waited in that house for the coming of the Holy Spirit. And then they were baptized in the Spirit of God. That place that they were was called the Mount of Zion. It sat in the Mount of Moriah. Zion is another word for church. So in the Mount of Zion, where David was buried, that's where the church started, in the Mount of Zion. So we are seeing God is bringing us back again to a house. And he's bringing us back differently. He shut the house, Veronique. He shut the house to the entire world. He's giving us a little sneak opening here and there where a few people are coming in. You know, churches that were, I saw one, a mega church that somewhere out in Texas, I won't call the name, but thousands of people that were there that attends a church. And when this minister came up, if I call him, everybody knows his name, there were 50 people that was there. 50 people. In other words, there were 19,950 empty seats.
Just like God did in the time of Joseph with Gideon, with the 300 you were talking earlier.
Yes.
So because they came out like 3,000 people, God said, no, I can't deal with the 3,000. I want just a few who are very consecrated to me. So you just choose the 300. So could it be that God is actually sifting the people from those who say, you know, who pretend that they were church, but they were actually not?
God is going to raise up leaders in this time. Every time there's a crisis, there are always men and women that will rise up to the occasion. God is going to raise up leaders that has voices that are not afraid to speak during this particular time, even at the expense of going to prison. Now, you remember Nelson Mandela. He spoke up. He rose up in the midst of apartheid. Where was he placed for 27 years? In a prison. He couldn't care less about that. He stayed in that prison until he made that prison a museum. People travel from near and far to go to that prison. They cannot put prisoners in that cell anymore. Why? Because that cell is a museum. You hear what I'm telling? But he rose up. He openly spoke out with a lot of other men and women behind him that were speaking too as well. And they began to speak against a couple of centuries old prejudice that is entitled apartheid, and destroyed and dismantled it. Plus, he became the president of that nation. He died and left successors in there to make sure that that thing does not raise its ugly head. So in this COVID-19, God is raising up men and he's raising up women. And some of you all might be listening right now. You may just be one of those men and one of those women. Because every time there is a crisis, there are always leaders that God himself will anoint and choose for the occasion. So he's raising up leaders in this time.
Wow.
In his way, not our way, but his way.
That's awesome. Awesome. That's great. Are you prepared to be that next leader that God would like to raise? Do you have the means to do really what he really wants to do through you? Be prepared and get yourself ready. We'll be right back with you after the break. Thank you very much.